Lesson 863, Robots. What a point on a scatterplot means. In this lesson, we'll describe the meaning of a point on a scatterplot in context. All right, in your notebook, let's go to page 70. And like we just said, we're going to describe the meaning of a point on a scatterplot in context. Describe the meaning of a point on a scatterplot in context. So we're continuing our look at scatterplots. Remember, scatterplots are made up of many individual data points. There's usually a bunch of dots on the graph, and we have to make sure that we know what each one of those points represents. So let's get some practice at reading this graph accurately. Now, you worked with robots in the activity in class, but here we have an example with a panda. You have a giant panda that lives in a zoo. What does this one point on the graph tell you about the panda? Normally on a scatter plot, there's lots of points, but let's just focus on what one of those points might mean. Well, as I'm looking at this point right here, I can think about the coordinates that make up that point. The x value, which is 36, and coming up, the y value, which we have to estimate here to be somewhere between 70 and 95. But the coordinate here says that the y value is 82. So let's make sure we understand what that 36 and what that 82 mean. Let's start with the 36. That's the x value. There's our 36. And if we want to know what that x value means, we need to read this label for the x-axis. That's the age of that panda in months. And I can do the same thing with that y value. For that one point, I can see that the y value is 82. But to know what that 82 means, I need to look at the label on the y-axis. It's the panda bear's weight in kilograms. So the panda is 36 months old, and the panda weighs 82 kilograms. So reading those labels on the sides really help us to understand what the coordinates in that point on the scatter plot means. Now here we were just looking at one point to understand what each of the numbers in the coordinate meant. But in a scatter plot, there's usually lots of points. So let's take an example of that. In this example, we have an ice cream stand, and it collected data on two things, the temperature and the number of customers over time. So let's read what this has to say. I'm going to start with the labels. The x-axis is measuring the temperature, so all of these values go from the least temperature to the greatest. And the y-axis represents how many customers we had, again going from the least to the greatest. So if we wanted to understand this data and put a circle around the data point that represents the day it was 72 degrees Fahrenheit outside, we're going to put a circle around that on here. Well, if we're talking temperature, let's go to the axis that refers to temperature. The x-axis is temperature. Let's come up to 72. And if I come straight up from 72, there's just one data point at 72 degrees. There it is. Let's put a square around the day when the stand had the most number of customers. So the greatest number of customers, the highest number of customers. Again, I'm going to look at my two axes labels. This label is about temperature, so that's not what I want. If I want the number of customers, I'm going to come up on this y-axis. And the most number of customers is going to be the point that's the highest on our graph. So we've got points all over the graph, but the one that sits at the highest level is this one right here. Let's put a square around that. So that's the day when we had 75 customers. That was the most number of customers we had on any of these days. Well, why might the ice cream stand want to collect and visualize that data? Well, if I ran the ice cream shop, it'd be nice to know if there was a connection between the temperature and how many people show up. I'm going to say the owner might want to know whether there's a connection between the temperature and the number of customers. If it's going to be hot on a certain day, maybe he needs to make more ice cream so he has enough to give everybody, or not to give everybody, to sell everybody. We plan to make more or less ice cream. So that data can help him to plan and have enough. Or if it's going to be a cold day and he doesn't need as much, don't make ice cream you don't need. Don't waste your time and ingredients. So in summary, a strategy you can use to determine what a single point on a scatter plot means, well, think of the coordinates of that point. Those numbers mean something. And for the x value, look at the label on the x-axis. The x value of that coordinate to understand what the number means. So let me just go back to my panda example up here. With this panda example, the x value was 36. And if I looked at the label for the x-axis, I knew what that 36 was. It was 36 months of age. And we'd do that for the same for the y-axis as well. Do the same for y. So reading the labels on your graph helps you to understand what each of these points actually means.